Okay, hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Global Training Template Launch event. My name is Tina Khouri. I'm the project coordinator for the Localization of Environment and Humanitarian Action project with the UNEP-OCHA Joint Environment Unit. I'm joined today with Stern Kita, who is the content developer for the Joint Environment Unit, to present to you the Global Training Template. Also today, we're gonna hear a few words from Alexandra Kappeler as the representative of SDC, who's supporting us on this project, and Yukiko also from the Joint Environment Unit for the closing remarks to talk a bit about the project. So thank you all for joining. Just a few notes before we start. Please feel free to add your information in the chat so that everyone can have a general idea about who's in the meeting, get to know each other a bit. And also please note that the meeting is being recorded. And the recording will be shared on the Global Template website later on for anyone who missed the meeting. They can join for the recording. Also, I want just to mention that I'm feeling a bit under the weather, so sorry for any inconvenience because of that. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to add them in the question section of the meeting, and we will try to answer everything at the end of the session. So for today's session, we have a busy schedule. We'll start off with a bit of introduction to get to know the participants, get to know you, where you're from, and have a bit of an overview of what kind of work you do. Then we will start with giving you a general overview about the Environment and Humanitarian Action Localization project, under which the global template that we are presenting today falls. And then we'll talk about the development of the global training template, how it happened, what are the steps that were taken for us to be able to develop this training template. We'll also briefly give you a general overview of the content and structure of the template and how it can be used with an example of how us at the JEU will be using the global template as part of our project. And finally, we will give you access to the template so you can explore a bit and see what it has to offer, and we'll end on a Q&A to answer any questions you might have about the template. So let's start off with an introduction. If you can join us on Slido using this number, or if you can scan the code, there are a couple of questions we'd like to ask to get to know you. So first, if you can tell us which country you're joining from. Switzerland, taking a big percentage. Portugal. Nice. I think we have a good, diverse group. Okay, I see some people from the UK as well. Ukraine. Okay, it's quite a diverse group with some focus on Europe, let's say. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next question. If you can let us know what type of organization do you work for? Sorry, we tried to keep the categories a bit broad. Okay, good. Lots of international NGOs. Okay, next question. The last question. We would like to know if you've ever participated or facilitated a training related to environmental sustainability in humanitarian action. Okay, it's good to see we have a few people with expertise when it comes to trainings related to environmental sustainability, but also the majority have not facilitated or participated, which is also great because this is what the template aims to help you with. Okay, thank you for answering those questions. We'll move on to the localization of environment and humanitarian action project. As I mentioned, the global template falls under this project, which is a project being implemented by the Joint Environment Unit. So the first phase was the development of the global training template. And this was basically the more comprehensive general training content based on which we will be continuing into phase 2, which is the creation of a more contextualized and country-specific training curriculum. So based on the training of the global training template, we will be developing the contextualized training material for 2 countries. The first country has been announced, which is Somalia, and the second country is still under consideration with to be announced soon. So the way we're looking to contextualize the content of the global training template for those 2 countries will be discussed in more details later on. But just as a general overview, we will be looking to make the content relevant for the specific country, whether looking at the specific policies related to environmental standards, related to the specific topography of the country, how the country is affected by climate change, how humanitarian action is affecting the country's environment, whether negatively or positively, what existing initiatives are already working on environmental sustainability in the country, and try to build capacities on those relevant topics for the local and national NGOs and humanitarians working there. And finally, the final step of the project is the in-country environmental network or the community of practice. So as part of the training, we're also conducting a training of trainers. And we're hoping that through the people who are trained in the training of trainers, we will be able to build capacity locally even after the project is implemented, and to create a network of experts who will continue to work on environment and humanitarian action and help build the capacities locally, whether for the humanitarians or to work with the government or even to work with international organizations who are implementing there. I'll move on to the global training template development. I'll hand over to Stern, who will walk us through the process. Over to you, Stern.
Thank you so much, Tina, for that background information, and good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sten Kita, and I'm part of the team that was working on this. So my role this afternoon is essentially just to give you an overview in terms of the development process, but also what this global template is focusing on, and also maybe how it can be of use to different stakeholders and players across the globe. So as Tina has said, this was more of a collaborative approach, which involved different stages. So some of you may be aware that the Joint Environmental Unit is also running an online existing Environment in Humanitarian Action training program or package that is still accessible. So the initial idea was also to start from what we already have and review the existing training, and also looking at what are the gaps and issues that maybe we could improve on, and then build on that, and also some of the developments that we have seen. We also did a review and we had discussions with different stakeholders in terms of what already exists. So there are some stakeholders that have got training materials on related issues. We reached out to multiple stakeholders in terms of what is available, and then we're kind of trying to build on the existing instruments that are available. We also did a knowledge gap analysis. So this was a global survey that we conducted. Essentially, the idea was also to understand the level of knowledge, the level of understanding, the level of expectation, but also what is available and what's the most effective way that we can move forward. So we got feedback from multiple stakeholders across all the continents. I think we received quite substantial feedback and guidance as well. At the time that we were doing this, we had already had a structure, so we're also trying to share our proposals, and then we wanted initial feedback based on that. Very central to the whole process was a steering committee. So through the Joint Environmental Unit, we came up with a steering committee comprising of various stakeholders that are experts in the field, operating at different levels, from international organizations, development partners, and other stakeholders that showed interest in the issue. So the idea of the steering committee was mainly to provide guidance and act as a peer review mechanism to the development process. They also assisted us in terms of providing additional guidance, additional tools and instruments that assisted us in terms of refining whatever approaches and instruments that we had. So through the steering committee, but also from the input from the knowledge gap analysis that we conducted, then we agreed on the template in terms of what are the content. We initially started with I think quite a number of topics that we wanted to focus on, I think about 15. And then over time, through the discussions with the steering committee, we also had discussions outside the steering committee. We engaged other partners, other stakeholders that have got an interest in the specific issues that are of focus in the global training template. And based on that, then we came up with an overall template and the focus in terms of the content, but also in terms of the structure. And then we proceeded with the drafting of the facilitator's guide, which is essentially the manual that is being launched today. So the drafting was being done. We were also receiving a lot of feedback, a lot of input. The steering committee were also providing their own input. But as I said, we also reached out to other stakeholders and partners that we work with to provide additional input. I should also mention that the drafting process, apart from the manual, we were also working on a PowerPoint slide deck. So I think later on, Tina is going to share a link where you can access all these. So apart from the manual itself, we also designed a PowerPoint slide deck that could assist in terms of the delivery of the training itself. So here we are today launching the global training template, and it is our expectation that this will be of use to all of us. So the next slide shows the members of the steering committee that were part of this process. So we acknowledge their contributions, the support, but also the critical feedback that they provided throughout the process. Without them, I don't think we would have reached this far. So this is also a word of appreciation. And the whole process was also would also not have been possible without the support of SDC. And maybe before I proceed to the next slide, which talks about in general what the global training template focuses on, I'd like to invite Alessandra maybe for just a few minutes just to say a few words, and then we proceed with the giving you an outline in terms of what the global template focuses on. Thank you. Alessandra, are you here?
Maybe you are muted.
Tina, would you be able to resolve that? I think she
Hello,
Cannot.
can you hear me now?
I think
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
yes, yes.
Hello, everybody. So, no, I was muted, I think, by the organizer, so I couldn't unmute myself. Sorry for this. Hello, everybody. It's a real pleasure with you, being with you, and thank you very much to the team for organizing this launching event, which I'm very happy about. So, I mean, I will be very quick. I guess it's more and more acknowledged, and also many humanitarian organizations have actually committed to better integrate or rather consider environment and climate also in humanitarian action. This is, for example, reflected in maybe like I think close to 450 humanitarian organizations who have signed the Climate and Environment Charter of Humanitarian Organizations, but also along, like this work and the signatories of this charter basically said that they are committed to improve, to consider environment and climate in their work, but they really lack the capacity to practically implement the commitments, or rather to also consider environment and climate better in their program and operations. So and also that although all these kind of global guidelines and global trainings exist about environment and climate, I mean, often, like it's tricky to basically really implement it locally because each and every context is different, as we all know. So there is a clear need for, let's say, uh, locally adopted methodologies for considering environment and climate in humanitarian action. And I think this project really answers to these needs. And I'm very proud of that SDC can actually support this project, which basically leads to locally adopted environment and in humanitarian action capacity building, let's say. And this global training template is a first step. So I'm very happy about this launching event, and congratulations to the team for this nice tool. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessandra, for that. So as I said, we also appreciate the support that was provided, and we do hope that will also continue as we roll out this training program as a whole. Yeah, so the next slide is essentially trying to provide you with what the global template structure is. So just to highlight that as I said earlier on, we started with quite a comprehensive list of topics or modules that we could focus on. And then we ended up narrowing down these to 11 technical modules. We also have one module that is focusing on the training of trainers. And then we also have a module that is specifically focusing on introduction to the training itself, how you can use the manual, and the different other introductory aspects, the flexibility that is there in terms of the usage. And again, who is targeted in terms of usage, but also in terms of application or implementation of this. We also have a glossary of terms. So we have also provided the key terms that are being used in the manual, but also key terms that are commonly used in the field with sources where we got that information. We feel that this also is there to assist stakeholders so that they can have a single point of source of information that they can use in terms of planning for their training. So the first technical module is an introduction module, an introductory module that essentially introduces the whole topic of involvement in humanitarian action in terms of what it is, why is it important, why is it relevant that maybe we need to focus on this. So it gives more like a background to the whole process. And we would recommend that maybe this would be important, particularly for those that would want to use this, to also look into this as the starting point, because it gives much of the background information and the background context that would be important. And then the next one is focusing on the screening process. So this is also key within the structure of the design of the manual itself is made on the understanding that there's flexibility for partners in terms of how they can use it. So I mentioned that we've got 11 modules. The expectation is not that we would expect all the 11 modules to be covered within a single training session. because most of them, they require quite substantial amount of time. So there will be a selection in terms of what is needed to be done at a particular time by different stakeholders. But there are foundational modules that we also recommend that this would be key in terms of trying to understand the context, but also in terms of whatever you'd want to do, you'd want, first of all, to start with screening environmental issues in humanitarian action. So this module is quite important. Here we've also included some of the screening tools that are available, not in detail, because we also have other training packages specifically focusing on some of these screening and assessment tools. But what I've provided here is just an overview and how the screening process can be done in terms of identifying the critical environmental issues that can arise in humanitarian action. And then the next module is specifically focusing on waste management in humanitarian context. So this is quite a central topic in terms of environmental harm that can be done as a result of humanitarian action. So we are providing also different type of waste and how each waste can be linked to humanitarian action, and also recommendations in terms of what would be the best approaches of minimizing waste from humanitarian action, but also ensuring that the waste generation does not lead to the creation of secondary risk and challenges within the communities that we are serving. And then module number 4 is focusing on water resource management. So this is more like a continuation of the waste aspect, but focusing specifically in terms of how we need to we need to ensure that humanitarian action does not lead to depletion of water resources, but also even pollution of water resources. And again, how effective water resource management is central to effective humanitarian action. So it has content in terms of the different sources, but also different ways how humanitarian action can have an effect on water resources. And we're making recommendations in terms of how best to manage water resources sustainably in humanitarian action, but also ensuring that there's continuity of operations within the humanitarian context. And then module number 5 is focusing on climate change adaptation and disaster risk. So this is quite a unique one because it's a bit different from the others, where we are focusing much in terms of the environmental harm that can be there. But here we're also trying to establish the linkages between climate change adaptation, disaster risk reduction, and humanitarian action, and also trying to emphasize the contribution of climate change to humanitarian action, and maybe how some of the humanitarian processes could also lead to the creation of new risks and challenges within the different communities, and how disaster risk reduction is central. So there's also an emphasis in terms of embedding resilience in the humanitarian action. Issues of anticipatory action also are covered in part in this module. And then module number 6 is focusing on land management, so sustainable land management. We understand, apart from the effect that is there on water resources, humanitarian action, particularly in context of maybe where we're creating camps or settlement areas or recovery initiatives, sometimes we can do a lot of damage to the land. So this module tries to identify some of the potential harm that we can cause, and also how we can sustainably manage the land, but also the resources that come with the land in terms of humanitarian action. But again, the obvious fact that we cannot do any humanitarian action without the use of land. So how do we sustainably use the land to make sure that we're not doing any harm, but again, we are also benefiting from the resources that the land offers to us. And then going on to module number 6, which is focusing on greenhouse gas emissions and sustainable energy management. You know that greenhouse gas emissions are also closely related to climate change, but the previous module focuses mainly on climate change adaptation, where this one is mostly on what processes within the humanitarian action would contribute to greenhouse gas emission, and how do we cut on those as part of the humanitarian action. particularly in terms of energy management. So how do we ensure that within the humanitarian context, we bring in sustainable energy management practices that do not lead to emissions of greenhouse gases, but also we're able to conserve energy, but also use it in a more responsible and sustainable manner. And then module number 8 is focusing on the supply chain and the logistics. So this is specifically in terms of the different processes that we go through in terms of humanitarian action, the whole supply chain, the movement of humanitarian relief items, the movement of even humanitarian actors, the whole supply chain. And we are also trying to see how can we sustainably manage our supply chain, but also logistics, so that we try to minimize. We may not completely prevent or remove this, but the idea is to make sure that we are able to be sustainable in terms of how we are managing our supply chain. So we're looking at the whole supply chain cycle. We're also looking at different types of logistics and how they may lead to environmental harm, how the humanitarian action may lead to environmental harm, and then also measures in terms of mitigation of those challenges that we may face as we work in our different roles and responsibilities. And then moving on to module number 9. So module number 9 is it more like tries to summarize the different aspects and looks at entry points in terms of where do we see ourselves coming in. So we're looking at the humanitarian program cycle. We're looking at the law of humanitarian clusters and what specific laws they can perform. What are the specific issues, for instance, that would arise in specific clusters, agriculture, health, education, and others? And maybe how best do we make sure that in the planning, but also implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of our humanitarian programs, within the clusters, within institutions, within organizations, we are able also to mainstream environmental concerns so that we try to reduce the harm that we bring when we are working. So this, as I said, is more central because it tries to bring all the other modules together and see how we can do better in terms of bringing this in our plans, bringing this in our operations, and trying to reduce the footprint that we're having on the environment. And then the module number 10 is more now goes outside as well, because we're looking at now collaboration. How can different stakeholders work together? How can we share the knowledge that we have? How can we exchange ideas? And this is also central to actually the development of the global template itself, because as I said, the template is designed based on what is already existing, and we're trying to make sure that that also promotes collaboration across different players, across countries, but also across different types of stakeholders, different levels of governance, so that at the end of the day, we take joint action to minimize the environmental harm that we could cause because of our humanitarian action. And then the last technical module is focusing on community engagement, capacity building. So this is more in terms of how best do we work with communities, what strategies can we use to reach out to communities, including those that are hard to reach, including in conflict situations, in other natural hazards or disasters that may occur, and how do we build their capacity? How do we build the capacity of individuals that are working in humanitarian action so that they're able to mainstream, but also to understand the environmental harm that may result from our humanitarian action. And then the last one is, as I said, this is a TOT package. So the idea is also to provide a training of trainers module that would assist those that will be using the template in terms of how they can design effective training, how they can also ensure that our training programs are not contributing to environmental harm in themselves. So in terms of venue selection, promotion of maybe online learning, reducing travel related to training, use of sustainable materials in the design, but also implementation of training programs. So it's not just about how to design and deliver training, but it's also focusing on how we make our training environmentally sustainable within the humanitarian cycle itself. So it covers both in terms of designing capacity needs assessment, as well as implementation of training programs beyond that. So these are the 12 modules that are part of the training manual itself. And then just to conclude by providing the structure in terms of what each of the modules would include. So we have a similar design for each of the modules. So you have the overview, and then you have the outcomes, and then of central importance is the facilitator's guide, which provides specific steps that are supposed to be followed by those that are going to be using the content in terms of in alignment to the time that is allocated to each one of these. And then we have also tried to provide comprehensive notes. The understanding also is maybe we also want this to act as a central library in terms of information. We have sourced this from different sources as well. We also understand we work in different contexts. Others may not have access to some of the materials. So I've tried to also provide specific notes for the facilitators that they can use in terms of enhancing their training, but also in terms of preparation for the training. And then there are activities that are also proposed for each one. So the training is mostly promoting participatory approaches, and we're proposing a number of activities that can be used. These are suggestions, but they can be adapted, as I said, based on the context, based on the needs on the ground, and then the delivery methods and the what assessment we can have. And then we also have review questions and key takeaways that can be there. So as I said, it's a package that includes the facilitator's guide, but it also includes the facilitator's guide that is in terms of the manual itself, but also the presentation template. So each of the modules, there's a presentation template specifically that would assist us in terms of the planning and then the delivery of the training itself. I'll stop here and hand over to Tina to conclude and tell us in terms of what are the next steps and what are the expectations in terms of the training package. I think I touched in terms of the users, because the target is across the board. So we're not really restricting this to any single institution. This is a global template that has been provided. So we expect multiple users, organizations, those that are working in environmental action, but also those that are working in humanitarian action. They can also use it. Some of us maybe we're from the academia. It could also act as a reference tool that can assist us in terms of planning, but also delivery of the training that we may have. And the expectation is that it's a flexible and adaptable tool. So we don't expect those users to use it 100% as it is. Actually, that's what we are promoting, that let's try to localize it, as Tina has said, and try to link it to the context in which our trainings are being conducted. Thank you so much. And Tina, over to you.
Thank you, Stern. Yeah, moving forward, so as Stern mentioned, that there are several ways to use the tool depending on what type of organization, on what level you want to contextualize. We're going to give the example of how we are going to be using the global training template for our localization of environment and humanitarian action project. So the first step would be that we'll be doing a mapping of country level stakeholders. So to map what existing initiatives are already there in the country, who are the stakeholders related to these initiatives and how they are working on environmental sustainability. In addition to mapping the knowledge gap analysis and doing needs assessments, so to assess who are the stakeholders that will be benefiting from such training as well, not just the people who might be contributing to the content of the training. And once we have a better understanding of what are the needs in the country for environmental training when it comes to humanitarian action, we will be working on the contextualization of the content of the global template. So which modules to include, maybe not all modules are relevant to the specific context. And within each module, what issues are relevant to the country, what issues are most important. Maybe some issues are very important and they're not included enough in the global template. So using the provided references, we can go deeper into these topics and make sure that the training curriculum is really localized for the country's need. Following that and adding to the localization element, we're going to translate to the local language. So for this project, we're really aiming to reach the small local organizations that perhaps otherwise won't have access to these tools that are provided in the global template. So we really want to reach them and make sure that the training is accessible for them. So translation to the local language is an important element that we're going to be doing in addition to offering the option for the general English training. Following that, of course, the delivery of the technical training. So as mentioned by Stern, there are 11 technical topics for the technical training element of the project, followed of course, by the training of trainers, and to make sure that the project will continue after the delivery of the training. The training of trainers is an essential part to maintain the project and make sure that it is sustainable. And also through a feedback mechanism to assess the project and evaluate its success. We will be building a lessons learned report to improve our process in the next country. So as mentioned, for now, we're implementing in 2 countries. So based on the lessons learned from the first country, we're hoping to improve in the second country, and later on, if the project is expanded to other countries, to have a standardized module for localization of this global template based on the lessons learned from previous trainings. And finally, the creation of the community of practice and the continuation of the training using these environmental focal points that were trained through this training, and also building partnerships with their organization. So it's not just the person themselves, but also their organizations, and ensuring that they are linked together, also linked with the government initiatives that are focusing on environment and humanitarian action, and linked also to international organizations that are working there, and creating this network where they can share best practices, where they can communicate any concerns or problems and find solutions together on the country level that is best for the country as a whole. So this is how we will be using the template. Now I will give you access to the tool, and yeah, so through this QR code, you can access the tool. I'll also add the link in the chat. So you can, oops, sorry about that. So you can access the tool, the template, and see what we've been talking about this whole time. And please note the different elements in the template, starting with the preface that includes a list of contributors and reviewers who helped develop the template, as well as the preface message, the forward message from the UNEP and OCHA heads of branches, a glossary of key terms that are very relevant to the topic of environment and humanitarian action, as well as all the different modules, the 11 technical modules, the TOT and the introduction module, which all include both facilitators manual as well as presentations. Let me just share the link in the chat. And I'll give you a couple of minutes just if you want to go through the template. And please, if you have any questions, add them to the Q&A. I see we already have a couple of questions. And please note, at the end of the template, there's a feedback form. We encourage you, if you do use the template, whether just one module or you used all the chapters, to let us know of your experience, any positive or negative feedback that you might have from using the template. And we're really hoping to make this more of a live training template. So we'll be updating the content later on based on your feedback. Please let us know if you're having any issues accessing the template. I've added the link in the chat, and you can also scan the QR code. Okay, while you're still taking some time to look at the template, I think we can answer some of the questions. So there's a question about providing more details on the criteria used to select which countries will be selected to develop the localized training. So for our specific project, we had a list of criteria for selecting the country. It was a few things, starting with we were looking at countries that are affected by climate change, countries where humanitarian response is affecting the environment, and where there's a large-scale humanitarian response, and where if environmental sustainability integration is implemented, can have a major impact on the environment for that country. And we were also looking at countries where there is some presence of international organizations, but also where local NGOs had a big part to play in the country's humanitarian response. Because this training, we will be targeting specifically the local NGOs. So we wanted to make sure that they play a big role in the humanitarian response in that country. So those were mainly the three main criteria. We're trying to diversify. So, for example, to have the pilot in different continents, in different contexts, just to make sure that the pilot is representative of several contexts and the results are not repeated because the contexts are very similar. So yeah, that's the selection criteria, and so far, Somalia definitely fits to all those criteria. And moving on to the second question, I don't know, Stern, if you want to answer that, if you can just repeat the list of modules. I think you're a bit too fast.
No, I don't know whether the question is will still stand now, or maybe it was being asked during the presentation. My understanding was that maybe that was something that was raised. So I can still quickly, so we've got 11 modules. The first is the introduction to involvement in humanitarian action. And then the second one is the environmental screening in humanitarian action. And then the third is sustainable waste management in humanitarian context. And then module number 4 is focusing on sustainable water resource management in humanitarian action. Module number 5 is climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. And then module number 6 is sustainable land management in humanitarian action. Module number 7 is greenhouse gas emissions and sustainable energy management. And then number 8 is on managing environmental impacts of humanitarian supply chain and logistics. Number 9 is on the environmental mainstreaming and financing in the humanitarian programs. And then module number 10 is cross-sectoral collaboration and knowledge sharing. And number 11 is community engagement and capacity building in humanitarian action. And then the last one is the training of trainers. So as Tina highlighted, we haven't consolidated these into like a single manual. What we've done is to provide these as individual modules. So you see that on the online template that you're accessing, these are presented as individual modules so that you should be able to have a selection of which ones would be of more relevance to you as well. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Stern. There's a question also about it would be great to hear more on how the country pilot rollout will take place and how organizations in country can engage in this process. Yes, so through the stakeholder mapping, we're hoping to be able to reach out to as many local organizations as possible to assess their needs for such a training. And of course, Nishani, we will be in contact with you to facilitate the process if there are any specific organizations who have signed the charter and already have the intention to implement environmental sustainability in their programs to make sure they are part of the stakeholder mapping. And for this, I just want to clarify that we're really trying to make the project as localized as possible. So all the steps from the stakeholder mapping, needs assessment, and the localization of the project will be done by local consultants in the country. Next question, how does this template and the modules relate to the FEED or humanitarian action in sudden onset emergencies? So in the module related to environmental screening, there's a lot of cover of available tools. and FEED is one of the mentioned tools on how and when it can be used when it comes to environmental sustainability. Other tools also mentioned, such as the Need Plus, which can also be used in sudden onset emergencies after, of course, life-saving activities have been done. So there are a few tools related to environmental screening, and in the module you can see clearly when and how each tool can be used within the different levels of environmental emergencies or general emergencies. I don't know, maybe there's some technical issues when it comes to typing in the message. I'm glad you can type in the Q&A. For the selection of the case studies and examples, we tried to reach out through the steering committee to collect a wide range of case studies and examples and make sure that they are a bit diverse. So in different contexts, different types of emergencies, different types of locations. So it is, if you're selecting something that is a bit more relevant, you will find an option that is maybe closer to your specific context. But due to some limitations, we're only suggesting a few. But they're just suggestions, and of course the facilitator can be the one reaching out and coming up with their own case studies and examples. So for the online training, it is now available. This is what we're trying to update through this training. So there is an existing online training on the EE Center, the same website you went to. There are a list of trainings, one of which is the Environment and Humanitarian Action. And that this training was built based on that original training. So thank you for the questions. I'm just gonna hand over to Yuki for some closing remarks. And then if we have more time, I'll answer the questions. Otherwise, I'll just answer in the chat.
Thank you
Yuki?
so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Tina. Yes, we are reaching towards the end of the presentations, and I would like to provide just a few remarks on behalf of JU as concluding remarks. First and foremost, we would like to express our deepest gratitude for the steering committee's members and the resource persons whose expertise and dedications have been really, really critical in shaping this training template. And special thanks to Stern for developing this material, and Ishita for enhancing the graphic component of the material. And also a huge thanks to Switzerland for materializing this project. Looking ahead, we, JEU, do plan or hope to scale up this training project following current pilot phase to support an additional 2 to 4 countries in delivering localized EHA training and strengthening local capacities, address this environment and climate change challenges in humanitarian contexts. This is, of course, needless to say that the scaling up would be depending on or contingent to securing adequate financing. And JEU, we are and we will be actively exploring funding opportunities to ensure that the project expansions and long-term sustainability. For those interested in becoming a part of this scale-up phase or of the pilot countries, we would like to encourage you to kind of start preparing by considering how this training could benefit your organizations or the project in country, and think about potential resources you could contribute while we aim to provide support for localized training. And please stay in contact with JEU for information on further development of this project. And I would like to thank all participants of these meetings and for the support. And we'd like to request your continued support for this project. Your engagement will be really crucial as we move forward with contextualizations of this template to specific local need and context, and together we really think that we can build local capacities and make some strides in integrating environmental considerations into humanitarian action. So thank you very much, and thank you very much, Tina, for leading this project and organizing this meeting. Over to you. You muted. Tina,
Sorry.
you muted.
Thank you so much, Yuki. And to end on your message of thanking everyone for joining, and please feel free to give us your feedback on the template if you do use it. And thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.